Hey guys, and so today I'm here with another episode of D3 Live. So today we're going to be talking about the Samsung Galaxy Player versus the iPod Touch 4th generation. Now before we begin, I do want to go ahead and wish you guys all a really happy new year, and also go ahead and let you all know that I'm using my brand new Nikon D3100. So hopefully the quality's a lot better. If it's not in focus or there's some technical issues, bear with me. I'm just still learning how to use it. So anyway, let's go ahead and just get straight on into the topic. Now, of course, Samsung has just recently announced that they will be creating an iPod Touch competitor in the Galaxy Player. Got so many Galaxy names. So this is going to look pretty cool. You know, a lot of us have been waiting for some kind of Android iPod Touch competitor for a while, and this looks like it's going to be one of the very first solid ones. So of course, we'll go ahead and talk about that in just a second. Let's just go ahead and back up and talk just a little bit about the iPod Touch 4th generation for those of you who aren't familiar. So I've got one right here. Basically, the iPod Touch 4th generation is a really solid device. Basically, it is an iPhone without the phone, which is the way a lot of people have, talked about it for a long time. You still have all the same apps. You still got a very similar, build. It runs the same kind of operating system. And with the new iPod Touch 4th generation, you do still have the FaceTime camera as well as a rear-facing camera, which, while not quite as good as the iPhone 4, still is pretty nice to have, in just a couple $100 iPod. So basically what Samsung is planning on doing is really doing their best to match this with the new Galaxy Player. So what they've done is very similar to what they've done with the Samsung Galaxy S lineup of phones. They've been known under a lot of different brandings such as the Vibrant, the Epic 4G, the Continuum, which is technically it's a little bit different, but they're all very similar phones. They've done pretty much the same thing. They've taken out the phone. They've made it where it's just going to be a standard MP3 player that of course does everything else that you would expect an Android device to do. So some of the really key things that I like about the Galaxy Player is the fact that it's got more stuff than the iPod Touch in a lot of different areas. So take for example, of course, it's got Android, which that's not such a huge advantage. Of course, Android, iOS, they both have their pros and cons. However, hardware-wise, it does have some big things. So one thing is you can actually go ahead. It does have an interchangeable battery. So unlike the iPod Touch, where the battery goes, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. It's certainly not easy to to tear the thing apart and to get at the battery. It's almost impossible. Whereas this, you can just pop a brand new battery in, no problem. In addition to this, it also does have GPS. Now, I have no idea why Apple has spent so long not putting the GPS, or putting any kind of GPS in the iPod Touch. I think it would make a lot of sense as, just being able to, for just a couple $100 to, have an iPod with GPS would do really well. But of course, this is going to be a feature in the Galaxy Player. They will be running Android 2.2 Froyo with their own custom interface over it. Personally, I'm not a big fan of custom interfaces. However, it shouldn't be a huge deal, and in fact, it will make it run a little bit closer to iOS. So if you've never used an Android device before, it should be a little bit more user friendly. And so continuing on with some of the other cool things, it will be available in 8, 16, and 32 gigabyte capacities. Of course, I'm talking about the Galaxy Player here. And it also will have a micro SD card expansion slot. So unlike the iPod Touch, where you buy it in 8, 32, or 64 gigabyte capacities, and there's nothing else to it. If you want to ever expand it or whatever, there's really nothing you can do. If you could easily go ahead and buy the Galaxy Player, then if you buy the 8 gig and you realize that that's not going to be quite enough for you, it's no big deal. To go spend a little bit of money, buy a a micro SD card, and you can expand it. So that's really a nice thing again that I really like about it. Now, as far as the screen sizes go, there's actually going to be a little bit of a difference. In the iPod Touch 4th generation, you'll have a 3.5-inch display with a resolution of 640 by 960. Very nice screen. I, of course, have my iPod Touch here, and I love the screen. However, the Galaxy Player will have a little bit of a different screen. It's going to be larger, a 4-inch screen, which should be very nice for typing, for watching movies, for a lot of different things. Indeed, I like the 4-inch just because it's really between a fine line between being way too big, to carry around and deal with. Also, it's not going to be, too small or anything like that. It's going to be a really nice size. That's going to be a 480 by 800 resolution display, and it's not going to be a Super AMOLED. So just like the iPhone 4 has a better display than the iPod Touch, it's going to be the same way the Galaxy S, which have fantastic screens. It's not going to be quite as good on the Galaxy Player. However, they should be, pretty decent. So anyway, guys, that's mostly for the the overall specs and all that kind of stuff. Now, of course, the Galaxy Player will be announced, and well, it's been announced, but we're going to be getting hands-on everything next week at CES. And since we're going to CES, that's going to be one of the first things I'm going to do is go get myself a hands-on, take a look at it. But from what I know so far, the Galaxy Tab and the Galaxy Player, I need to learn that name. The Galaxy Player should be a really, really solid competitor to the iPod Touch. Now, of course, it's got a lot of the same features. It's got still the same front-facing, and I believe it should be a little bit better rear-facing camera. So it's got a lot of the, the strength of the iPod Touch, but it's also got a lot of additional things that, that really make it, are really going to make it a lot better. So definitely looking forward to see, the price and all that kind of stuff. But from what we know so far, the Samsung Galaxy Player should be a really solid competitor. Okay, so for the second segment of D3 Live, I'll be taking live questions from everybody in the chat. So we've got quite a few people in here, as always, so we'll go ahead and just take some questions. Can you jailbreak, mod, or hack the Samsung Galaxy Player? It's actually a good question. Of course, Android phones and Android devices in general tend to be a little bit simpler to hack than maybe the iPhone, the iPod Touch, and Samsung and specifically doesn't seem to be too focused on keeping everyone out. Generally, the Samsung Galaxy lineup is fairly simple to hack, so I would definitely expect to be able to root all the the Galaxy Player just pretty much the same way you would root any other Samsung device. Is Apple making firmwares more often just to keep up with the jailbreak developers? Yes and no. Yes, there have been several. Like, I believe it was 4.0.2 was solely just to go ahead and pretty much keep people from jailbreaking. And a lot of times they will, speed up the firmwares to come out just to patch holes. But that said, a lot of times they will just go ahead and just wait. If there's going to be a new update, they'll go ahead and just wait for it. So sometimes yes, sometimes they don't really care. Is Samsung jealous of Apple? Well, that's kind of a hard thing. I think anybody is jealous of Apple, just of how much money they're making. But I don't really think so. I think that they're all just trying to compete. I just don't think that it's going to be like they're trying to copy it or anything like that. I think that the iPod Touch market, I'm surprised that nobody's really tried to go after that. Just because the iPod Touch, that's such a great idea. I mean, that's why I like mine so much, because you don't have to pay a ton of money and be stuck on a carrier that you might not necessarily like. However, of course, you still have all the cool features and all that kind of stuff. So I think the Samsung Galaxy Player is going to be the first of many of those kind of devices. Maybe not the first, but one of the first major competitors anyway. It's going to be a video editing program for the Galaxy Player, like the iMovie for the iPod Touch. That's actually a good question. Not that I know of. I don't really know. I think there are a few really slight video editor things in the Android app market. However, I do think that there's definitely a big possibility there. One of the major things with video editing, though, is that it's not a very simple app to write. And of course, that's why video editors generally tend to be fairly expensive. When you buy them for the computer, and it took Apple themselves to make iMovie. So I think there's definitely a big possibility of someone making it, but I just don't know how good it will be until someone big like Samsung or Google or somebody like that actually steps forward and makes an app like that. Will the Galaxy Player have a camera? Yes, it actually will have two. The rear-facing camera, I believe, is a 3.2 megapixel camera, which should be better than the iPod Touch, which I think is about 0.7 megapixels. Definitely, the iPod Touch is not a very good camera for taking stills. But the front-facing camera, both should be just a standard VGA. So the front-facing camera should be about the same, but the rear-facing camera on the Galaxy Player should be quite a bit better. Do you think Apple should let other companies sell computers with Mac OS X installed like Microsoft does? That has been a thing that people talked about for so long. Whether Apple should go ahead and just open up and allow me to buy a Dell running Mac or whatever. I don't think that. I think that it would be kind of cool, and that would be a really nice thing to be able to go ahead and just, instead of buying Apple, you can buy OS X on whatever you want. But I don't see it happening. I mean, Apple is doing so well with OS X right now. And indeed with Lion coming out soon. I just don't see them actually just deciding, you know what, we'll just open it up and just let it. While I think it's absolutely possible, and it would be really nice if they did, not in the next few years. Maybe beyond that, stuff could change, but for the foreseeable future, I don't see that happening. I think it would be cool if the Galaxy Player could be hacked to run iOS. That's actually kind of funny you mentioned that. iOS and the iPod and the iPhone have actually recently been hacked to run Android. Now, well, I wouldn't say recently. It's probably been a few months, but yeah, so it actually does go the other way around. One of the key differences though, is that Android is open source. Anybody can do whatever you want, whereas iOS definitely is not. So whereas anybody can go ahead, download Android, and you can do whatever you want. You can hack it however you like. When you get right into iOS, it's a lot harder, and I don't really see that being able to happen, just because it's a lot more complicated when you don't have the source code. It's not more complicated, it's next to impossible. So it would be cool, but I really doubt it. So anyway, guys, that's it for this week's episode of D3 Live. Now, just one thing I do want to note, I'm not 100% sure what will happen next week for next week's D3 Live, as I will be at CES. So do just keep in mind that D3 Live might be a day or two early, might be a little bit late, might be some weird times, so definitely do look out for that. I will try to keep you guys updated. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching.